The prairie wind carried dust and silence when the rancher spotted a thin boy stumbling across his land. Clothes torn, lips cracked, eyes hollow. "Please, sir, food." The rancher's hand hovered near his rifle, but something in the boy's voice cut deeper than any blade. He led him inside, placed bread and milk on the table. The child ate like he hadn't seen food in days. What the rancher didn't know was, that boy was not alone. The sun was falling red over the prairie when the rancher spotted movement on the dirt road. A boy, no older than 10, stumbled forward, thin as a fence post, his boots worn to rags. He collapsed right at the gate, dust curling around him. The rancher approached cautiously. Out here, children alone meant trouble. Sometimes they were bait. His hand hovered near his revolver, until the boy looked up with eyes hollowed by hunger. "Please, sir, food," he whispered, voice breaking. The rancher carried him inside, setting bread and milk before him. The boy devoured it, crumbs scattering across the table. Watching him, the rancher felt old ghosts stirring, the memory of his own son, gone too soon. But children didn't just wander the plains. Something was wrong. When the rancher stepped back outside, the moon revealed fresh hoofprints. More than a few. The boy wasn't alone. The rancher didn't sleep. He sat on the porch with his rifle across his knees, eyes scanning the ridge. Coyotes howled in the distance, but his gut told him worse was coming. Inside, the boy lay curled under a wool blanket, finally breathing steady. But the rancher's ears caught faint noises on the wind, the kind of sound men who'd lived through border skirmishes never ignored. Hooves. Soft, deliberate. Riders. By midnight, shapes appeared against the silver skyline. Horses, half a dozen, maybe more, keeping their distance, circling like wolves. They weren't rushing in. They were watching. Waiting. The rancher muttered low. "So, you've brought company." He stoked the fire, laid out cartridges on the table, and checked the locks on his doors. The boy hadn't stirred, but the rancher knew when dawn came, his quiet ranch would no longer be his alone. Morning broke, pale and cold. The boy was sitting at the table when the sound of hooves thundered closer. The rancher opened the door, rifle in hand. What he saw made him blink. Not outlaws. Not ragged bandits. Women. 6 of them, riding hard, their faces half covered with scarves, their eyes sharp as blades. Each carried themselves like they'd ridden through fire to get here. The lead rider, tall with a scar along her jaw, dismounted first. She looked at the boy, then at the rancher. "That's our brother," she said. Her voice left no room for doubt. The boy ran to her arms, clinging to her waist. Relief softened her hardened features, but when she turned back to the rancher, her eyes were steel again. "You fed him," she said simply. "For that, you've bought yourself trouble. We were being hunted, and they'll come. Here next." The rancher's porch had never felt so small. Over coffee, the women told their story. Their family had been run off land by a ruthless cattle baron named Maddox. Their father had died fighting back, and they'd been running ever since, protecting the youngest, the boy the rancher had fed. The rancher listened, silent but steady. These weren't helpless wanderers. Their eyes carried storms. Yet they were tired, bone-tired. "We only stopped 'cause he was starving," one said. "Didn't mean to drag you into this." The rancher studied them, jaw working. He'd lived years alone, not owing or owed by anyone. But the boy's hollow face still haunted him. He set his mug down with finality. "You're here now," he said. "And if trouble's coming, it'll find me ready." The women exchanged looks. Strangers though he was, something in his voice told them they could trust him. By noon, word had spread, Maddox's riders were on the move. A dozen men, hard-eyed and armed, were seen cutting across the valley. The rancher, the women, and the boy worked quickly. Fences were reinforced. Rifles were checked. Oil lamps and barrels were placed where they could become fire traps. One of the women, Josie, climbed into the hayloft with a long rifle. Another, Ruth, coiled wire across the road to trip horses. Clara handed the rancher his old shotgun. "You remember how to use one of these?" she teased. He gave her a look. "I never forgot." When the riders appeared on the ridge, the sun behind them, the rancher felt something stir in his chest. Not fear. Not anger. But purpose, something he thought he'd buried long ago. The riders charged. Horses thundered, dust boiling. The rancher's yard erupted into chaos. The tripwire snapped 3 horses down in an instant. Gunfire roared from the hayloft. Josie's aim was true. Ruth lit the oil barrels, and flames flared, forcing riders to scatter. The rancher held the porch, shotgun booming, each shot dropping a man or forcing the rest back. The women moved like they'd fought together for years, covering one another, fierce and unyielding. The boy huddled inside, but through the window he watched with wide eyes. For the first time, he wasn't running. He was seeing his sisters fight for a home, even if it wasn't theirs yet. Through the smoke rode Maddox, a mountain of a man with cold eyes and a black hat pulled low. His voice carried above the gunfire. "You think you can hide on this ranch? You think some worn-out cowboy and a handful of women can stand against me?" The rancher stepped forward, rifle leveled. His voice was steady as stone. "Not hiding. Standing." The standoff silenced the yard. Then Maddox sneered and drew his pistol. The fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. The battle raged across the ranch yard. Maddox's men pressed hard, but every trap, every bullet, every ounce of defiance turned them back. The rancher took a graze across his arm but didn't falter. The women fought like wildfire. Maddox's gang, they weren't prey, they were defenders. At last, Maddox faced the rancher man-to-man in the dust. Fists flew, boots churned dirt, and when Maddox's gun slipped from his grasp, the rancher's rifle was already at his chest. "Ride," the rancher growled. "And don't come back." Maddox spat blood, but he saw it in their eyes. The ranch was no place for him anymore. He and his men fled, broken and beaten. When the smoke cleared, the ranch stood, scarred, but alive. The women patched fences, gathered cattle, and mended bullet holes. The boy slept soundly for the first time in weeks. The rancher sat on his porch, sore but alive. He looked at the women moving across his land, their laughter breaking through the silence. It had been years since he'd heard such sound here. "You didn't ask for company," Clara said one evening. The rancher gave a rare chuckle. "No. But maybe it's what I needed." Weeks passed. The ranch thrived in a way it hadn't in years. The women worked cattle, tilled fields, and filled the long quiet house with life. Folks in town began to whisper. They said the rancher who once lived alone now shared his home with a band of fearless women and their little brother. They said a dying child had brought them together, and together, they'd fought off a tyrant. The rancher didn't care much for town gossip. He just knew the land no longer felt empty. And so the story spread, about the rancher who fed a hungry child, and how that single act changed his life forever.